In this recording, I asked people why is it difficult to be vegetarian in Britain? And here are the views of interviewees in the studios and streets in East London. We are here in East London studios, and with me is Maya Medhurst. And I have a question, Maya. Do you think it's difficult to be vegetarian in Britain, and why is that?
Yeah, I do actually think it's difficult. 'Cause some restaurants and pubs don't cater for vegetarians, or if they do, then they only have one vegetarian option. And this option does tend to be better than in previous decades, but still, it's not ideal to just have one option. But at least now there's a bit more bit more imagination used in the dishes. Like previously, they might have had just an omelette. Another thing that makes it difficult is that some supermarket items, which we would expect to be vegetarian, like for example strawberry yogurts, are actually not. This is quite surprising, I think, and also devious, because people can easily feel safe in knowing that they're eating something that's meat-free, when in actual fact they're eating something that has the insides of a cow's stomach in its ingredients. So yeah, being vegetarian myself, I've often found myself in these sort of situations.
Do you think it's difficult to be vegetarian in Britain?
Well, I think it is. I think it's a cultural problem, really. I think in Britain, if an experience of going around the shops or the supermarket, I think, is illustrative. I think in my local supermarket, the first thing you come to is the fish counter. And then you pass all the vegetables and fruit and then make your way around to the meat counter, and along the way there's all the kind of the pre-packed meals that go in the microwave and things like that, all of which are things like steak and kidney pie or spaghetti bolognese. And you might find a vegetarian option, but that's almost like something that's on the side. And so I think it's very much part of the culture that actually, we eat meat products with vegetables on the side, and if you want to be a vegetarian, that's a special case. And I think it's the same when you go into a restaurant. If you go into a restaurant, you will find your starters and main courses and things like that are more often than not meat-based or fish-based, and actually quite often in a restaurant you will get the vegetarian options under a separate heading, as though this is specialised food or something like this. And so I think it's quite natural in a way to grow up in Britain with the idea that being a vegetarian is somehow different or outside of the mainstream. And it's a cultural thing. I think it's probably worse in Argentina, where actually, you struggle to find anything other than potatoes and beef, I think. But there again, in India, for example, it's probably a completely different experience, because in India, meat is extremely expensive. You don't eat it very often because of the price of it. And so meat becomes part of a special event or a celebratory meal or something like that. Quite a lot of the famous Indian recipes are for wedding dishes or something like that, where you cook a chicken. And this is really special. But most of the time in India, you eat what they grow, which is vegetables. So it's completely straightforward to be a vegetarian in India, because that's actually what the culture is. So I think ultimately it comes down to culture, what people grow up with, and I think this is all reinforced by how our shops and restaurants are set out. So yes, I agree with you. I think it's difficult being a vegetarian.
Are you vegetarian yourself?
No.
Here with me is Angela Edwards. And Angela, I would like to ask you, why do you think it's difficult to be vegetarian in Britain?
Well, it might not be difficult, but under the circumstances, I think, is we're in a multicultural society now, and we have amongst us in Hindus who perhaps don't like eating beef. We have amongst us Muslims who don't eat pork. We have a lot of halal meat, chickens and one thing and another, and I think it influences us a great deal, being amongst surrounding cultures, because they don't think certain meats are acceptable. And then we have to look at our own diets and what doctors have told us. A lot of people have high cholesterol, and eating red meat apparently is bad for high cholesterol. So we kind of cut that out of our diet, and I think we have moved on from our rural diets of pork, beef, meat and 2 veg dinners, which is all we used to have, say, during the war and in the 1950s. I mean, that was all there was. Now we have far more options. We have other choices. We have rice to go with our meal. When I was young, we would never have dreamt of having other rice other than with rice pudding. So rice is another option, and we're looking at our diets more scientifically on what does what's good for our insides, what's good for our body. We're actually looking at it rather than just accepting what's being put on our plates. So I think it's probably far easier to become a vegetarian these days, not difficult.
It's not difficult at all. Every restaurant has vegetarian meals, and the supermarkets are full of vegetarian sections. You've got products like Quorn, which we didn't have before. You've got vegetarian styled products like sausages that are vegetarian. You've got mince for making things like chili, etc. It's very easy, and also in a restaurant as a vegetarian the choice is more limited, so people like me who can never make their minds up find it much easier.
I think it's difficult to be a vegetarian in Britain for, not for the usual reasons perhaps, but for the slightly interesting way that food in this country is marked out in supermarkets. We actually have quite a lot of vegetarian food here, but the representation is often quite difficult to see on the packaging, and you may find one brand will occasionally just decide to make one of their products which you'd expect to be perhaps vegetarian, such as a pasta sauce, non-vegetarian sometimes. So it can be difficult when you're browsing the supermarket for what you're looking for, think you bought something that's okay, and you get it home and find out it's got fish or some other non-vegetarian food in it. So that's one of the difficult things of being a vegetarian.
Are you vegetarian yourself?
Yes.
For how long?
21 years.